You're so clumsy. Your hands shake so much that I see tea stains all over the house. And what kind of rags are you wearing again today? Where do you even dig up those awful, old-fashioned dresses? Mom, when was the last time you even looked in the mirror? If you were our maid, I wouldn't pay you a single dollar. How many times do I have to tell you, when I have guests over, disappear? Don't embarrass us, my own son begs me. The very son I raised, the one I sacrificed countless opportunities for, the one I carried under my heart for 9 months. Or at least I thought I carried. Life can be so unpredictable, it makes your hair stand on end and your blood run cold. Then he yells at me again, Mom, I told you, hide in your room or in the pantry. You're ruining our celebration. Isn't it obvious? Go watch some silly melodrama. By tomorrow, I don't want to see you in the living room or the kitchen. You don't belong among decent people. Stay out of sight. And thank God I don't look like you. I spent most of my life pouring myself out, love, time, money, everything I had, until one night, sitting at a table covered with food I'd paid for, I overheard something that broke me in a way I'll never forget. This isn't just a tale about being humiliated. It's about waking up. If you've ever felt like a shadow in your own home, then this is a story you'll understand. Stick around, hit subscribe, and drop me a comment about where you're watching from. I'd love to hear your story too. I still hear it sometimes, the faint clink of crystal glasses, the low jazz drifting through the rooms of the house I'd worked for, the smell of the roast chicken I had seasoned that morning, cooking while I ran errands to make sure dinner was perfect. Funny thing is, I wasn't even supposed to be at that dinner. Camilla had forgotten to mention her parents were visiting again, and of course, the house had to look spotless, again. I should have walked out the door before they arrived. I should have recognized the warning in her mother's eyes, that mix of curiosity and disdain, when she looked me over and asked, "And you are?" Camilla didn't even hesitate. She laughed, tossing her hair back like it was a comedy routine. "Oh, that's Abigail," she said, grinning. "Our unofficial maid. Keeps the place running." And then the laughter came, hers, her parents', even my own son's. I just stood there, holding the empty wine bottle I'd carried up from the basement. I forced a polite smile, pretending the ground hadn't just opened beneath me, pretending my heart wasn't breaking piece by piece. I set the bottle on the counter and excused myself, moving slowly down the hall to my bedroom. Behind me, their laughter echoed. Not a single correction, not even from my son. Not one person said, "That's my mother." Nobody defended me. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the door I had painted with my own hands back when we first moved in. I remembered the day I signed the mortgage, my name, my credit, my down payment. Andrew had just finished college. Camilla wasn't even in the picture yet. They had nothing. I gave them everything. And now, somehow, I had become the maid. The next morning, I followed the same routine. Made coffee. Fed the cat Camilla pretended to like. And when she floated downstairs in her yoga gear, too busy scrolling her phone to even greet me, I waited. Eventually she glanced up. I handed her the house keys, all of them. The front door, the back, the garage, the mailbox. She frowned. "What's this?" I smiled. "Good luck paying the mortgage." Her brow creased. "What?" I didn't answer. I just walked past her, down the hall, past the framed photos I had hung, the furniture I had picked out, the walls I had painted. I didn't pack a thing. I only grabbed my purse and the old coat I wore the day I brought Andrew home from the hospital. I didn't even say goodbye. I heard Andrew calling after me as I opened the front door. I didn't stop. He chased me barefoot into the driveway, but I kept walking. I didn't slam the car door, I closed it gently, calmly. Something inside me had broken, but not with rage, not with sorrow. It was something sharper, cleaner. It was clarity. And clarity doesn't shout. It doesn't plead. It simply knows. And for the first time in my life, I knew I was finished. I didn't know where I was headed, but I knew exactly where I wasn't staying. In the rearview mirror, the last thing I saw was Andrew standing in the driveway, stunned, not realizing what he'd just lost. Lilibeth was. I didn't fully realize it either. They say you never notice you're drowning until you take that first breath of air. That first night in the tiny apartment my great-aunt Lilibeth had left me, it didn't feel like freedom. Not yet. It felt like silence, thick, heavy silence that draped itself over the rooms like dust. The place smelled like time itself. Old floorboards creaked, the wallpaper was yellowed, the heater groaned like it had survived better decades. I set my bag down on the kitchen table and stood there, not sure if I should cry or laugh. I did neither. I just stared at the chipped tiles, remembering the home I had walked away from. But it wasn't my home anymore. Not for me. The next few days, I drifted around like a ghost. Slept on the couch because the bed frame was busted. Ate peanut butter sandwiches and soup warmed in the microwave. I didn't reach out to anyone. Not because I didn't have anyone, but because nobody reached out to me. Not a word from Andrew, no calls, no texts, nothing. Maybe Camilla told him not to. Or maybe, worse, maybe he just didn't care. My mind replayed that dinner over and over, the laughter, his laughter. I kept thinking back to the years I'd carried him alone, after his father walked out. I gave up my career, my plans, myself. I worked nights cleaning motel rooms, mornings stocking shelves, just to keep food on the table. And when my parents passed and left me with their insurance money, I poured every dime into buying that house. A home for him. I never asked for rent, never demanded a thing. And somehow, in Camilla's world, I'd been reduced to the help. So, I started writing. Old spiral notebooks, the kind I used to buy for Andrew back in middle school. Page after page poured out, not for anyone else, just for me. I wrote down the things I'd never spoken aloud, how I used to wait in the kitchen hoping for a thank you, how I cried alone in the garage when they went out to dinner without me, how I pretended to be asleep so I wouldn't hear them mocking my TV shows in the living room I'd paid for. And then one day, while digging through the upstairs storage closet for a light bulb, I stumbled across the old metal trunk Lilibeth used to keep under her sewing machine. Heavy. Rusted. I pried it open, expecting spools of thread and buttons. Instead, I found envelopes. Dozens of them. And one, in particular, that turned my world upside down. It was addressed to me, written in Lilibeth's familiar hand, dated almost 30 years earlier. If you're reading this, it means you've come back. And I'm sorry you had to. My chest tightened as I unfolded the yellowed pages. Inside were hospital documents, handwritten notes, and a single photo of a newborn wrapped in a hospital blanket. But it wasn't Andrew. The name on the papers was John Parker. I read Lilibeth's letter 3 times before the Lilibeth began to sink in. She had been a nurse at the hospital where Andrew was born. And she admitted she had carried doubts ever since. Lilibeth wrote that she had noticed something strange the night I gave birth, some last-minute shuffle in the nursery, confusion with the ID tags. By the time she questioned it, the babies had already been sent home. She never told me. She admitted she was scared, and that part of her prayed she was mistaken. But years later, while sorting through her old files, she stumbled on a document she shouldn't have found, a quiet settlement from the hospital to another family. That's when she knew. Andrew wasn't my son. My hands shook so badly I thought I might faint. I stared at the photo, at the name written beneath it, John Parker. My mind rejected it at first, because if John was mine, then who was Andrew? And who was I to him? But then something unexpected happened. I didn't break down in grief. I didn't even burn with rage. I felt free. Not because my love for Andrew had disappeared, but because suddenly all the pain, all the years of feeling misplaced in my own life, had a reason. Maybe that coldness I always felt from him hadn't been in my head. Maybe the distance was real. Maybe he had always sensed it too, that we didn't quite belong to each other. For the first time, I wondered if I hadn't been crazy after all. I stayed up the whole night, digging through every paper Lilibeth had saved in that trunk. She had kept it all. DNA reports, affidavits, even a clipped article about the Parker family, well off, well educated, still living right here in town. My real son had been growing up just miles away from me. When I finished, I folded the letters carefully and slipped them into a fresh envelope, placing it in my nightstand drawer. Then I stood in front of the mirror for a long time, studying the reflection of a woman I barely recognized. But for once, I wasn't ashamed of her. She was cracked, yes, but cracks let in the light. She was waking up. And the world had no clue what that awakening meant. The silence that followed wasn't gentle. It was punishing. For weeks after reading Lilibeth's letter, I lived inside it. I didn't know what to do with the Lilibeth. It hummed inside me like a live wire, dangerous and impossible to ignore. I didn't reach out to Andrew. I didn't run straight to John. I just existed. Each morning I brewed a single cup of coffee, stood at the dusty kitchen window, and tried to make sense of who I was now. Because the Abigail who raised Andrew wasn't the same Abigail holding those letters. That woman had been a mother, a wife once, a giver until she had nothing left. But stripped of all that, who was I? One night, the heater in the apartment died. I lit a candle, wrapped myself in blankets, and curled up on the couch with the hospital files spread across my lap. I must have read them 100 times. Every detail matched. Every signature, every timestamp lined up. It was all true. John Parker was my son. He had been born in the same hospital, the same night, in the same wing as Andrew. And the hospital had buried the mistake with a quiet settlement, hoping it would stay buried forever. Lilibeth had copied everything before her death, leaving me the pieces of a Lilibeth that had been stolen from me. The grief hit, but not for Andrew. I grieved the life stolen from me, the birthdays I never celebrated, the first days of school I never walked through, the skinned knees I never kissed, the science fairs I never attended. All the things I thought I was giving to my child had belonged to another boy. And yet, I didn't feel hatred toward Andrew. My love for him had never been biological, it had been unconditional. Or so I told myself. But when the boy you raised doesn't defend you, doesn't even see you, it forces you to question everything. It was a Tuesday afternoon when I finally gathered myself. I had been hiding long enough. I wasn't ready to face Andrew, not yet, but I could start somewhere. Somewhere small. So I walked into town and stopped across the street from a little bookstore on the corner of Main and Elm. Parker's Books. Dark green paint, hand-lettered signs in the window. I had passed it countless times without noticing. And then I saw him. John. I didn't need confirmation. He was about 30, maybe a touch older. Clean-cut, glasses perched on his nose. He was helping a young woman pick out a poetry collection. His voice was gentle, patient. His stance calm but steady, like he knew exactly who he was. I stood frozen on the sidewalk, my heart hammering in my chest, tears rolling down my cheeks as I realized I was looking at my son. Not sobbing, not loud, just quiet, unstoppable tears soaking into the collar of my coat. I didn't go inside that day. I couldn't. I just watched him. And then I came back the next day. And the day after. Soon it became a ritual. I'd sit on the bench near the corner, sip coffee from a paper cup, pretend to check my phone, all while stealing glimpses of John's life, this life I had never been part of. It wasn't stalking. It was mourning. And it was preparation. Because as I sat there day after day, I started piecing things together. I learned the rhythm of the store, the deliveries, the customers, the flow of the afternoons. But I wasn't only watching John. I began keeping track of Andrew and Camilla too. I knew their routines well enough already. Camilla practically broadcasted her life on social media, her brunch spots, yoga classes, wine tastings. She left breadcrumbs everywhere. What I discovered made me sick. They weren't struggling, like they claimed. They were faking it. Camilla's business, her lifestyle coaching, was smoke and mirrors. Rented office space, bought followers, credit cards stretched thin to keep up appearances. Andrew wasn't working either. He'd quit his job 6 months earlier. Camilla called it manifesting a new chapter. I called it denial. They were stacking cards higher and higher, blind to the wind coming their way. I didn't tell anyone what I'd learned. Not yet. Instead, I opened a second notebook. Not like the first, where I poured out my feelings. This one was different. Strategic. I filled it with dates, names, business filings, property records. I wasn't just grieving anymore. I was preparing. They thought I was gone. They thought I was invisible. But I was more present than ever. And they were about to remember exactly who I was. The first time I saw John up close, I almost forgot how to breathe. It was a rainy Thursday. The bookstore was quiet, nearly empty. He was humming to himself as he restocked the biographies. I lingered outside too long, and when he glanced toward the front window, our eyes met. When our eyes met, he gave me a polite, welcoming smile, no more than the kind of courtesy you'd offer a stranger. And that's exactly what I was to him. A stranger. My chest tightened, and I turned away quickly, fumbling with my phone as if I were checking messages, though my hands shook too much to make it believable. I hurried off, rounded the corner, and barely made it to my car before the tears came. How do you even begin to tell a man that his entire life was built on a mistake? How do you look a grown man in the eye and say, "You're not who you think you are, and neither am I"? That night, back at the apartment, I pulled out Lilibeth's letter again and read it 3 more times. She hadn't just stumbled across the Lilibeth, she had investigated it. The name John Parker wasn't a guess. It was confirmed. She had tracked down the settlement papers. The hospital had kept me in the dark because I was never supposed to know. And the Parkers? They must have known something. Maybe not the entire Lilibeth, but enough to accept a quiet payout. But I wasn't angry at them. I wasn't planning revenge. I didn't even know what I was planning. All I wanted was to know him, to see if the hollow ache inside me could be eased by the reality of who he was. So I went back. I started small. Bought a book. John himself rang it up. "Good choice," he said with a smile. "Hard to find these days." His voice, steady, kind, hit me like a memory I never actually had. It was familiar in a way I couldn't explain, and my throat tightened as he handed me the bag. Our fingers brushed for a second, and I almost forgot to breathe. "You own this place?" I asked. "Sort of," he said easily. "My parents helped me get it off the ground. They're retired now, so I keep it running." Of course he had help. Of course he had support. John had a safety net, real parents behind him. Andrew had only ever had me, my blood, my sweat, my sacrifices, and he'd turned around and reduced me to a punchline. The universe had scrambled the puzzle and left all of us cut and bleeding over the wrong pieces. I started stopping by the bookstore every few days, playing it casual. Sometimes I bought a novel, other times I just browsed the shelves. Eventually John began to recognize me. "Back again," he'd say with that easy smile. We made small talk, the weather, books, the latest local events. But I never gave him my name. Not yet. It wasn't time. Meanwhile, back in the wreckage of my old life, things were shifting. Out of nowhere, Andrew sent me a single text, "Mom, are you okay?" That was it. After 3 weeks of silence, that was all he could manage. I didn't reply. I had nothing left to say to him. But I did start digging deeper into their world. I pulled the deed to the house. Still in my name. Camilla had already tried refinancing without my permission, denied. She couldn't afford the mortgage. Andrew had no income. I could have pulled the plug right then, evicted them and been done with it. But no. That would have been too quick, too clean. I wanted them to feel it. The slow unraveling. The gnawing fear. The realization that the ground beneath their feet didn't belong to them at all, it belonged to me. Every night, I wrote. My new journal wasn't about emotions anymore. It was meticulous, almost clinical. Every receipt, every scrap of conversation, every detail John let slip, a favorite author, a hobby, a childhood memory, I recorded it. Not as evidence against him, but to understand the son I never got to raise. And somewhere between the lines, the Lilibeth sharpened. Andrew hadn't mistreated me because of some accident at birth. He mistreated me because he chose to. Because Camilla encouraged it. Because, somewhere along the way, my own son stopped seeing me as a person to honor and started seeing me as someone to dismiss. John, though, he didn't even know who I was. And still, he treated me with more kindness in 5 minutes than Andrew had shown me in 5 years. I wasn't ready to tell him. Not yet. But I was getting close. And when the moment came, I wasn't just going to tell him my name. I was going to tell him everything, the hospital, the switch, the life that had been stolen from both of us. But before I could do that, I had to watch the last threads of my old life unravel. Because once they snapped, I knew I'd never look back. I never set out to become a shadow in my own story. But sometimes, stepping out of the light is the only way to see people clearly. After that day in the bookstore, something shifted inside me. Not suddenly, not like a lightning strike, but like dawn creeping slowly across a frozen field. Quiet, unstoppable. I didn't rush. I wasn't just reaching for a son I'd never known. I was reaching for myself. I walked taller. Spoke stronger. Bought a second-hand laptop and began typing everything I had gathered, evidence, timelines, names, records. This wasn't a diary anymore. It was a strategy. It was survival. And one thing became undeniable: Andrew and Camilla's world was duct tape and lies. The house, still legally mine. Camilla's so-called brand, Camilla Ascends. A cardboard empire. Fake clients, fake testimonials, a curated feed designed to sell personal growth advice while she cruised around in a leased car she couldn't really afford. I found the LLC paperwork. Checked the tax records. Scrolled through reviews. Every post, every event was a photo op. Behind it all was nothing but debt, maxed out cards, a defaulted loan, Andrew's student debt still hanging over them like a storm cloud. They were suffocating, but too proud, or too arrogant, to admit it. And I realized that all it would take was one little tug on a single thread, and everything would collapse. But I didn't pull it. Not yet. Because there was still John. I kept going back to the bookstore, and he still didn't know who I was. Each conversation chipped away at my fear. We talked about small things, good coffee, TV shows, the noise of the city. Once, we even sat together in the tiny cafe next door. He told me he had almost become a teacher, but his love for books pulled him into owning a store instead. "You remind me of someone," he said one day, sipping his tea. "Someone I can't quite place." I smiled and answered lightly, "Maybe a librarian." He chuckled. "Maybe." That little exchange lingered with me for days. Because it wasn't just that I liked him. I recognized him, not just from the papers Lilibeth had saved or the photographs she'd tucked away, but in the way he carried himself, in how he treated people, how he listened with patience, how he held a quiet kind of strength. It felt familiar, like something that had always belonged to me. I saw it in his posture, his calm, his steady presence. I started imagining a different life, one where I'd raised him. I pictured us baking cookies in the kitchen, me cheering from the sidelines at soccer games, clapping until my hands ached. The images were so vivid they made my chest tighten with a pain I didn't have words for. But no matter how much I wished, I couldn't rewrite the past. So instead, I planned for the future. The first step was practical. I called a lawyer. Not to lash out, but to set things right. I wanted the house sold. Legally, it was mine, I'd made the down payment, paid every bill, and never signed it over. Andrew always promised, "We'll transfer it into your name later, no rush." No rush, of course, because I was footing the bill. Now I wanted it official. My name, my rights, my home. I met an attorney downtown, a woman about my age, sharp-eyed, no nonsense. She listened quietly, no judgment in her face, then nodded and said, "We'll file this week." I signed the papers without my hand trembling once. That evening, I walked by the house. The porch light glowed. Camilla sat on the swing, glass of wine in hand, scrolling on her phone. Inside, Andrew lounged on the couch, controller in hand, playing video games. Their lives were on autopilot, completely oblivious that the ground beneath them was already shifting. It wasn't revenge. It was balance. When the house sold, they'd know what it felt like to be powerless. Maybe then they'd understand what it was to be discarded. I didn't slam doors. I didn't scream. I simply walked, watched, and waited. The first domino had fallen, and they hadn't even noticed. I've always believed silence carries more power than noise. Strength isn't in how loud you shout, it's in knowing you're right. The day the official notice went out, I sat in a cafe near the courthouse, stirring honey into my tea with a calm I hadn't felt in years. My lawyer said Andrew and Camilla would receive it by 10 a.m. At exactly 10, my phone buzzed. Andrew. I let it ring until it stopped, then turned the phone face down on the table. My silence said what words never could. It wasn't that I didn't want to hear his voice. I just wasn't ready to hear another lie. Later that day, an email popped up from him. Just a short message, "Mom, what are you doing? Please call me. Camilla is freaking out." Of course she was. The mortgage was due, and now refinancing was impossible. The woman they thought was too weak to matter was the one holding the deed all along. They never saw it coming. A week later, another call, this time from Camilla. I didn't pick up. She left a voicemail, her voice strained, tight with false calm. "Abigail, we really need to talk. This is just a misunderstanding. Andrew says you're going through something, and we're here to support you, but you're putting our lives at risk, and that's not fair." I listened twice. She called the house hers. My silence sharpened, deliberate. They still didn't understand. But they would. 2 days later, Andrew showed up at my apartment. I spotted him through the peephole before he knocked, hair messy, dark circles under his eyes, looking like a man coming apart. He knocked once, then again, then spoke, "Mom, please don't do this." I stood with my hand on the knob, but I didn't turn it. I let him sit in the weight of being ignored, just like I had for years. The following week, my lawyer finalized the listing paperwork. The profit from that house would be mine, every cent of it. Legally, ethically, emotionally. Mine. Camilla tried to fight back, claiming contribution of value. My lawyer just smiled and said, "Let her prove it in court." She couldn't, because she never invested in anything but appearances, and now those appearances were cracking, one filter at a time. Word spread fast. Her parents stopped leaving comments on her social media. Clients began to slip away. She even made a video, ranting about the unfairness of generational property law. Nobody bought it. People saw through her mask. I didn't post a single word. I didn't have to. Instead, I kept showing up at John's bookstore. We had coffee again, talking about an old novel we both loved. He recommended a memoir. "It's about grief," he said, "but also forgiveness." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "I think you'd like it," he added. "Maybe I would," I answered softly. But not yet. I wasn't done grieving, or forgiving. Back at the apartment, I began boxing up old photos, Andrew as a baby, school portraits, birthday parties where I did the work and got none of the credit. I didn't throw them away. I just put them aside. Because the woman who had lived her life giving everything away was gone. And the woman who took her place? She wasn't bitter. She wasn't angry. She was awake. The papers were signed. The house was going on the market. And across town, in that green-painted bookstore, my real son was laughing at something a customer said, completely unaware that his life was about to change too, but in the best way. Because not all endings are tragedies. Some are beginnings in disguise. I used to think masks were for costume parties. But Camilla wore hers like it was part of her skin, smiling, flawless, always posing, always angling her voice just right for an audience. The thing about masks, though, is they eventually crack. And I was about to break hers wide open. The idea came to me one morning as I scrolled through the local business directory. I already had enough dirt, credit problems, phony Instagram sponsorships, overdue mortgage payments. But I wanted more than gossip. I wanted proof. Facts. Something solid they couldn't spin. So I hired a consultant. A man named Darren. Quiet, professional, discreet. I told him I needed a deep dive into a company, nothing shady, just a private audit. I gave him Camilla's business name, Camilla Ascends LLC. He went to work. A week later, he handed me a neat folder. And even I wasn't prepared for what it contained. Camilla's entire empire was smoke and mirrors. No tax filings for the last 2 quarters. Invoices doctored to look legitimate, but the clients didn't even exist. Photo shoots staged at rented properties she claimed were home makeovers. Her so-called partnerships were just affiliate links with inflated metrics. She wasn't just pretending to be successful. She was deceiving everyone. I asked Darren, would this hold up under scrutiny? He looked at me and said, if this goes public, she's finished financially, professionally. And that's when I made a decision. I printed everything. Then I found the address of Camilla's parents. The same people who once laughed in my home, clinking wine glasses while their daughter humiliated me in my own kitchen. I mailed them the file anonymously. No letter, no signature. Just a simple note on top that read, everything you think you know is a performance. 2 days later, the first cracks appeared. Camilla's Instagram went quiet. No stories, no curated morning routines. Her newest post, an inspirational quote about being misunderstood, was flooded with strange comments. Then, like dominoes, her world began to collapse. Her website went offline for maintenance. Her last planned workshop was cancelled due to unforeseen circumstances. And then I heard the cherry on top from an old neighbor who still followed her. Camilla's mother was seen leaving her house in a rage, shouting on the phone, face red, purse swinging wildly. Whatever happened behind those closed doors, it wasn't filtered and it wasn't pretty. Andrew called me again that night. I didn't answer. He left another voicemail. Mom, I don't know what's happening. Camilla's parents aren't speaking to us. Someone sent them stuff, documents. They think we forged them. Did you? Did you do this? I didn't reply. He was finally seeing her for who she really was, and himself, too. He had spent years defending a woman who destroyed everything in her path. Starting with me. Let him feel it. Let him sit in it. That night, I walked to the bookstore again. John was closing up. He waved when he saw me. Back again, he said, unlocking the door to let me in. You should just work here at this point. I smiled. Maybe I should. We sat on the floor surrounded by stacked paperbacks. He was cataloging a new shipment. I helped without being asked. Why do you come here? He asked. Not unkindly. The question caught me off guard. I looked at him. Really? Looked at him. He had my eyes. I hadn't noticed before. I like the way it feels in here, I said. Like nothing's. Pretending to be something it's not. He tilted his head. Considering me too. We worked in silence after that. No small talk, no more questions. But in that quiet, something settled between us. Not Lilibeth, not yet, but something close, a thread connecting us. And for the first time, I didn't feel like a ghost in someone else's life. I felt seen. And the woman who once stood invisible in her own kitchen, she was gone. In her place stood someone they never expected, someone they never should have underestimated. I used to think heartbreak came in one big blow, like a car crash or a door slamming shut. But it's not like that. Not always. Sometimes it comes slowly, like water leaking through a roof, drip by drip, until one day the whole ceiling collapses. And Andrew, he was finally standing under the flood. The news had reached him by then. The house was officially listed. The mask Camilla wore had crumbled, her business exposed, her reputation unraveling, and with nowhere else to point the blame, Andrew did what he always did. He came running to me. I heard the knock before I saw him. It was a quiet afternoon. I was just finishing a cup of tea when the sound echoed through the apartment. 3 soft raps. Hesitant, like the knock of someone who didn't know if he'd be welcomed or slammed. I opened the door slowly. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, unshaven, thinner than I remembered. Shirt wrinkled like he pulled it off the floor. "Mom," he said, voice cracked. "Can I come in?" I didn't answer, just stepped aside. He walked in and stood in the middle of the room like he didn't know what to do with his body. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Finally, he broke. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. "To us?" I almost laughed. Us, as if there had been an us in years. I sat down in the armchair across from him, calm, composed. "I'm not doing anything to you, Andrew. I'm doing something for me." His jaw clenched. "You're selling the house." "My house. I grew up there." "And you gave it away," I said, my voice low. "You let your wife turn me into your maid. You watched it happen. You laughed. You never even apologized." He didn't deny it. Just looked at the floor. "I thought you were just being dramatic," he mumbled. "I didn't know it hurt you like that." I stared at him. "That's the problem, Andrew. You never bothered to know what hurt me. You just assumed I'd always be there cleaning up after you, paying your bills, nodding along while you let that woman chip away at who I was." He flinched. "Camilla's not who I thought she was. That's not news to me." He finally looked up at me. His eyes were glassy now. "I lost everything." I didn't blink. "No, you gave it away." Silence stretched between us. "I miss you," he whispered. I sat up straighter. "I raised you," I said. "Fed you, clothed you, sacrificed for you, and you let me be humiliated in the house I bought." His lip trembled. "I thought she was helping me. I thought we were building something." "You built a lie," I said. "And now it's falling apart." He stood then, pacing the room. "So that's it. You just walk away." I got up, walked over to the drawer by the kitchen, and pulled out the envelope. Lilibeth left me. I held it in my hands. "I'm going to tell you something now," I said. "And I need you to listen. Really listen." He nodded, confused. I handed him the envelope. "These are your birth records. Read them." He sat, opened it slowly. His brow furrowed, then fell. He read the letter, the hospital files, the DNA test. Lilibeth had quietly ordered after all those years. He looked up at me, eyes wide. This can't be real. It is. You're saying I'm not your son. I'm saying you weren't born to me, but I raised you as if you were. I gave you every piece of me, even when you didn't want it. He went pale. So who's your real son? I didn't answer. He sat there, shell shocked, mouth open, pages trembling in his hands. I don't know who I am anymore, he whispered. Now you know how I felt, I told him quietly. For years Andrew had been a stone, never shedding a real tear. But that day, I saw something in him snap. Not with rage. Not with satisfaction on my part. Just peace. Because I had finally said the words I had carried for so long. I walked him to the door. He turned back, eyes desperate. Can we fix this? I held his gaze. I don't know, I said. But it's not my job to try anymore. Then I closed the door behind him, not with anger, but with finality. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one keeping it open. It took me 3 days to figure out how I was going to do it. I practiced the conversation everywhere, in the mirror, behind the wheel, even in the grocery line with a basket of oranges in my hand, whispering lines I could barely finish. I'm your mother. There was a mistake. You've lived a life that wasn't meant to be yours. And so have I. But nothing sounded right. Because how do you drop a Lilibeth like that into someone's life and expect them to survive the impact? Still, I knew I had to try. John was in the bookstore as always. Golden light spilled through the windows, softening the shelves, scattering shadows across the floorboards. The place felt almost sacred, like the Lilibeth belonged there. When he looked up and smiled, I nearly turned and walked out. But I didn't. Hey, he said, cheerful. Perfect timing, we just got a batch of rare poetry editions. I swallowed hard. Actually, I came to talk. Something in my voice made him pause. He studied me for a second, then nodded. Sure. Come on back. He led me through a side door into a tiny break room, an old kettle on the counter, a mismatched couch, a chipped table. It was unpolished, uncurated. Real. We sat. My hands twisted together. I've been coming here for a reason, I started. I figured, he said gently. You have? You're not exactly here for the books. I let out a shaky laugh. No. I'm not. I pulled out the envelope, Lilibeth's letter, the birth records, the DNA report, and laid it on the table between us. He frowned. What's this? Something that's going to change everything. His eyes met mine, cautious. I drew a deep breath. 30 years ago, there was a mistake at the hospital. 2 babies were switched at birth. His brows knitted, confusion spreading across his face. My son was given to another family, I said. And their son was given to me. He froze. I raised him, I continued softly. I loved him with everything I had. But he never loved me back. Not really. His eyes searched mine, silently piecing together what I wasn't saying. You think I don't think. I know. He looked down at the envelope, hands trembling as he picked it up. Inside were the files, the timeline, Lilibeth's confession. He read in silence. Every second stretched like an eternity. When he finally finished, he didn't look at me right away. He set the papers down, fingers still clutching the edges as if to anchor himself. This is a lot, he said at last. I know. And you're Abigail? Yes. His eyes shimmered. I don't feel anything. Not yet. You don't have to, I told him. I'm not here asking for a place in your life. I needed you to know. He nodded slowly. Why now? Because I couldn't live with the silence anymore. Because the Lilibeth deserves to breathe. He leaned back, exhaling hard. I already have parents. They raised me well. I know, I said. And I'd never ask you not to love them. We sat there in that cramped little room, surrounded by old paper and peppermint tea. And for the first time in years, I felt relief. Not joy, not closure, just the freedom of not carrying the weight alone anymore. He stood after a while, pacing slowly. I don't know what to do with this. I don't either, I admitted. But I don't hate you. Tears welled in my eyes. That's more than I expected. He turned back to me, a faint, fragile understanding in his eyes. You didn't have to tell me. But you did. I didn't know how not to, I whispered. He nodded again. Can we take it slow? I don't want to force this into something it's not. I wouldn't ask for anything else. He gave me a small, cautious smile. You want to stay for tea? I smiled back. I'd love to. That afternoon, we didn't mention the files again. We talked about books, about the weather, about how he hated wind chimes but loved the sound of rain. The past sat between us, raw and unresolved, but something had begun. Not a relationship, not yet. But maybe, just maybe, a beginning. By the time autumn came, the leaves weren't the only things changing. The house sold faster than I'd expected, at full asking price. Andrew and Camilla had 30 days to pack and leave. No extensions, no second chances. I didn't force them out of spite, I forced them out because that house had been my prison for too long. Watching them dismantle their perfect life box by box was like watching a stage set being torn down. Every plant, every pillow, every curated detail had been borrowed time. The play was over. The day the moving truck pulled up, I drove past. I didn't stop. I just watched from a distance as Camilla barked orders at the movers, her sunglasses hiding whatever was left of her pride. Andrew paced the lawn, phone pressed to his ear, circles worn into the grass. I wondered if he ever thought this day would come. And if he did, whether he ever imagined it would be me who brought it. Their fall wasn't a tabloid scandal. There were no screaming matches, no front-page stories. But it was absolute. Camilla's parents cut them off. Her business collapsed, losing sponsors one by one. Her once shiny brand was now a hushed cautionary tale. The woman who once laughed at me in my own kitchen now couldn't afford her daily matcha or overpriced skincare. Andrew tried to find work, any work. But with no degree, no references, and no recent experience, every door closed in his face. He ended up in a small apartment on the edge of town. I heard this from my lawyer. I didn't ask. And I didn't celebrate. Because this was never about revenge. This was never about revenge. It was about Lilibeth, and about consequences. Meanwhile, my life was slowly, quietly becoming something new. John and I kept meeting, always in simple ways, coffee, chats about books, swapping articles, tossing little comments about life back and forth. One day he asked about my writing. I told him I had started a memoir, that I had a story to tell, even if it never got published. He smiled and said, "You should. Stories like that matter." He never called me Mom, and I didn't expect him to. That wasn't the point. What we were building wasn't born of duty, it was born of choice. And that made all the difference. One afternoon we wandered through the farmer's market together. John picked up a jar of apple butter, laughed, and said, "My mom used to make this every fall." The way he said my mom didn't hurt. It felt natural. Right. Because he had a mother. And I had a son who hadn't truly seen me until it was far too late. Some nights, I'd sit alone with a cup of tea and wonder, was Andrew sleeping on a mattress or just the floor? Did Camilla still slip into her silk robes at night? When they looked at each other now, did they finally see everything they had ignored before? I didn't miss them. What I missed was the idea of what we were supposed to be. But grief like that is just a shadow. It fades, little by little. Pride grows in its place, especially when you finally learn to love yourself more than you ever craved someone else's approval. Before the sale closed, I walked through my old neighborhood one last time. Not to haunt it, but to say goodbye. I passed Andrew's old school, the park where I pushed him on the swings, the grocery store where I counted coupons just to buy his favorite cereal. And then I let it all go. I had given everything to a family that never gave back. Now I was giving to someone who might never call me mother, but who looked at me with kindness, curiosity, and respect. Sometimes you don't need redemption. Sometimes you just need peace. And for the first time, I was starting to feel it. It was early November when Andrew's text came through. Just one line, "Can we meet?" Just once. I stared at it for a long time. It had been weeks since I last saw him. Weeks of silence heavier than any argument we could have had. But there was something different in his tone. It didn't sound angry, or desperate, or accusing. It sounded like surrender. We met at a small park on the edge of town, the kind with rusted benches and a trail circling a dried-up pond. I chose it because it was neutral. No memories. No ghosts. He was already there, sitting hunched on a bench, hands clasped between his knees. When he looked up, for just a second, I saw the boy he used to be, awkward, uncertain, waiting for direction. I sat down beside him, careful not to sit too close. He cleared his throat. "I'm not here to ask for anything," he said. I nodded, staying quiet. I wanted to understand. I reached into my bag and pulled out the same manila envelope, Lilibeth's letter, the documents, the DNA proof. I placed it in his hands. He didn't open it. He just held it in his lap like he'd already memorized it. "I did a test of my own," he said. "After you told me." Same result. I nodded again. "I've spent weeks trying to figure out what to do with it," he admitted. "And I kept asking myself, if I wasn't your son, then what was I?" I looked at him, really looked, and said softly, "You were my child. But I know how you treated me." He winced. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it." "You don't," I said plainly. "But that doesn't mean I hate you." He turned, eyes brimming. "Then what does it mean?" "It means I finally love myself more than I love the idea of you." The silence that followed was thick, but full of meaning. He bowed his head. I thought I was protecting Camilla, standing by her. But I was just hiding behind her, wasn't I? "You let her rewrite the story," I told him. "And you handed her the pen." He nodded slowly. "I wish I could undo it." "You can't." We sat there in the cold November air, two people who had shared a life built on a mistake, now unraveling it piece by piece. Then he surprised me. "I hope he's good to you." I blinked. "Who?" "John. Your son." My breath caught. "He's kind. Gentle." Andrew gave me a faint smile. "Then I guess some of that came from you." We both laughed, soft and tired, not joyful, but not bitter either. "I don't want to be in your life if it hurts you," he said. "But if there's ever a place for me, just a corner of it," he trailed off, but he didn't need to finish. I understood. I stood, looking out over the pond. Leaves floated across the surface like ashes. "I'll think about it," I said. He nodded. "That's more than I hoped for." As I turned to go, I placed my hand on his shoulder for just a moment. That was it, the final moment. Not closure, but understanding. And that was enough. Because I didn't need to fix him anymore. I didn't need fixing either. I just needed to be free. And I was. For the first time, I really was. I used to think freedom was too big a word, something reserved for parades, speeches, fireworks. Not something a woman like me could actually live. But the morning I turned the key to the front door of John's bookstore, I finally understood it. He had called me the night before, said he had something to show me. His voice was casual, but there was weight under it. When I walked in, he was waiting by the back wall where a new wooden sign hung above an arched doorway. The words carved into it made me smile. The next chapter. "What's this?" I asked. He handed me a single brass key, small, simple, polished. "It's a new section," he explained. "Cozy reading space, coffee corner, community talks." I want it to be more than a store. I want it to feel like belonging. I turned the key over in my hand. "And you want me to open it?" He met my eyes, his voice soft but firm. "I want you to have it. You gave someone else your whole life. They treated you like furniture, like background noise," John said softly. "But I see you. You don't have to prove anything to me. You've already done more than enough." Tears filled my eyes, but I forced them back. "You don't have to do this," I whispered. "I know," he said. "But I want to." I walked toward the doorway under the carved sign and slid the brass key into the lock. It turned easily, as though it had been waiting for me all along. Warm light spilled through tall windows. Shelves lined the walls, already half filled with memoirs and classics. A rug anchored the center of the room, an old armchair sat ready, a small table beside it with a simple tea set. It felt like stepping into a dream I hadn't even known I was missing. I turned to John, speechless. He smiled. "Consider it yours, for as long as you want it." I stepped into the middle of the room and just stood there, breathing in the scent of new wood, paper, and possibility. That night, back in my apartment, I opened my old notebook one last time. The last page was blank. On it, I wrote. I was a woman who gave until she disappeared. Then I became the woman who took it all back. Not with rage. Not with fire. But with silence, with Lilibeth, and with the kind of strength no one saw coming. The next day, I finalized the donation. A portion of the house sale went directly to a foundation for women starting over, women who had been dismissed, discarded, underestimated, just like I had been. They called to thank me, but I didn't need their gratitude. Because every time I stepped into that bookstore, into the next chapter, I remembered exactly who I was now. Not Andrew's mother. Not Camilla's maid. But Abigail Destiny. Woman. Survivor. Author of her own ending. I never needed permission to begin again. All I needed was a key. And this time, it didn't open someone else's door. It opened mine. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you have a story of your own, share it in the comments. Your voice matters.